Time, please.
All right, welcome to our New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for today, November 10th. We have just a fabulous show tonight with Nelson George and Sean Stuart, the producer and director of the Willie Mays documentary, which I'm sure many of you have seen, and if you haven't seen it yet, it's playing all the time on HBO and Max.
The second icon that.
If we can just shut off, I can't see who's on here.
Okay.
Okay. It's streaming on HBO Max all the time, anytime you want it. It's going to be frequently on all of the HBO channels, and I think it's playing right now. Harvey had told me. Before we get started, just so you're aware, next week we'll have Armand Peterson, who will be discussing West Western from the book, The Team That Time Would Never Forget, the 1951 New York Giants. After that, we will break for Thanksgiving. Without any further ado, I present Sean Stuart and Nelson George, the creators of this Willie Mays documentary. I'm just going to throw out a few things for them to talk about, and then I think they'll talk more, and then it'll be your guys' turn to ask all the questions that you want. Gentlemen, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time out, and what great timing it is, as the premiere was just 2 days ago, and I was shocked. I figured you guys would be so busy, but you really came through, and we cannot thank you enough.
Think about it. I mean, it was on HBO like
2 days ago. So I guess my first questions to you would be, how did this come about? Why'd you do it? How did COVID affect it? Because I know you had originally wanted this to be Alpha Mays' 90th birthday. Gentlemen, the floor is yours. Again, New York Giants Preservation Society, we welcome you. Let's give it up for Nelson and Stuart.
Gentlemen, you should probably start with how.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. So yeah, we Nelson and I, it was a long journey, and where it started, we originally, Colin Hanks and I had done a short documentary, a 30 for 30 ESPN short film about the Giants mascot, the Crazy Crab. And that was just a little something, a little tidbit, a little piece of something that we kind of fell in love with. And after that movie was over, Colin and I sat down and after a great experience with our favorite team, the San Francisco Giants, asked what could we do next? What project would be worthy to pitch back to the Giants and Major League Baseball to find something to do. And of course, the one story that had not been told, the most important story, I think, in Giants living history, was the documentation of Willie Mays' life story. So I reached out to Nick Trotta over at MLB. I reached back out to Mario Aliotta over at the Giants and Larry Baer, and they all gave us a resounding yes, but relayed the groundwork that many had tried and many had failed, that Willie was a very difficult egg to crack. So, Colin and I put it to bed for a minute. It was after I had done a two-part Muhammad Ali documentary with Spring Hill, and I was over meeting with Maverick Carter and Jamal Henderson from the producing side of the movie as well. And they asked what we had in our back pocket. My partner, Glenn Zipper, and I mentioned the Willie Mays documentary, and they jumped at it. And from there, we're a whole bunch of producers who can, only do so much. So we immediately realized we needed to find a filmmaker, someone who could actually, jump onto this with us and do the work that creatively, I think, and probably holistically needed to be done. And the first name that came to mind that we all agreed upon that was a no-brainer, and if he was willing, was Nelson George. So at that moment, I will hand it over to Nelson George to discuss a little bit about the process and kind of where we went from there. If you want, Nelson, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I should start with saying I grew up in the streets in Brooklyn, New York, 60s and 70s playing stickball. And in the 60s, the number one team to imitate players of was the San Francisco Giants. Every kid kicked their leg up like Juan Marichal. They were friends of mine who loved Stretch McCovey, and McCovey had a very unique batting stance. Plus, he was so tall. Kids would like do the McCovey stretch when we played softball. And ultimately, Willie Mays. And every kid in the neighborhood at one time or another took a shot at doing the basket catch. Usually a shot and a miss at doing the basket catch. So that was my introduction to Willie. And then in '72, the Mets, he comes home to New York. And I remember vividly the New York Post, the Daily News, which had really great sports sections, jumping all over that, giving these stories, giving me the history of Willie. Bill Gallo, who was a famous cartoonist in New York at the Daily News, did these caricatures of Willie, great portraits. And Dick Young, who was a notoriously mean, yet famous sports writer, wrote really glowingly of Willie. And Dick Young didn't write glowingly of many people. So I got this introduction to Willie's as a New York historical figure when he came back to New York. And as I grew up in time coming on, I got more and more context for who he was in New York, San Francisco. And then I didn't really know this until many years later that he was in the Negro Leagues as a kid. So one thing that really struck me when we started talking about doing the film was how many major developments in baseball history Willie was integral to. Jackie Robinson enters the majors, and Willie, a few years later, is a wave of players, like Ernie Banks and Hank Aaron, and all these guys came out, Elston Howard came out of Negro Leagues team into the majors. So he's part of that wave, and he's the most successful, famous player of the 60s who does that. Then the Giants moved to San Francisco. He's part of that, a very important movement of baseball West with the Dodgers alongside and the Giants. One thing I did leave out, that Willie was also became famous in New York through the introduction of television. So you're getting the games being broadcast nationally on television, and fans are seeing players for the first time, and Willie leaps off the TV screen, right? In the mid 60s, as the civil rights movement is happening, Willie is a crossover star, athletic star, who's on the cover of Time magazine. He's regularly on the Ed Sullivan Show, which on Sunday night was the show for most of my childhood, certainly. He's on Bewitched. He's on, Donna Reed Show. So he's crossed over in a way that was very unique at the time and sort of foreshadows the ways in which athletes now regularly appear on television and are able to make all these moves. So in so many different ways, Willie was there as part of a big transition in baseball, and these transitions in baseball were also transitions in American history. So when Sean and the team approached me, there was all these different points of which I really was interesting, aside from the baseball straight narrative of his career, where he intersects with history. I think we met him, and this is a good Sean story, actually. We met him, I looked at it, I think it's September 25th, 2019. We went to a game.
That sounds right.
And myself, Colin,
Arizona
Jamal.
Diamondbacks in town playing the San Francisco Giants.
And so we go in, and Sean, tell them what happened.
Well, I was the unwitting person who was first to walk through the door, and Malcolm Heineke, who is Willie's closest advisor and lawyer, introduces me to Willie and says, "This is Sean Stuart, the producer on the movie." And I reached in for a handshake and thinking I'm shaking the hand of a 89-year-old man. I'm not going to go in too firm. I'm going to give it a nice medium handshake. And Willie wrapped his baseball glove-like hand around my hands and squeezed it so hard, looked me in the eye, and said, "You call that a handshake?" The entire room burst into laughter. I cowered into the corner, but we were off to a great start. So here's the bookend of that. When you see the film, at the very end, we have these shots over the closing credits. And in that section, you see me shaking Willie's hand.
and basically trying to hang in there with Willie, which is a callback to Sean's interaction with him. And what you don't see is that I shook his hand before that, and he basically crushed it. And I was trying to hold on to my manhood and went back in to challenge Willie. And Willie goes, "I see you're trying." So I think one thing to be said about that section and the handshake is that, you know, and ESPN, I think about a year ago, maybe more, there was a whole conversation that got very popular about, oh, you know, those guys in the 60s, those stars were just playing against firemen and plumbers. You know, basically to kind of denigrate the athleticism of the great players. I think that was in reference to Bob Cousy and the Celtics. But one thing we really wanted to emphasize in the film was the physicality of Willie Mays. That when you see these shots of him as a young ball player, you know, full of Minneapolis Millers, he's got an 8-pack, not a 6-pack. When you watch the footage of Willie running, it's almost like we sped up the footage. He's so fast going from first to third and some of the footage. He was an elite athlete in any era. And I think that was a big part of, you know, our visual mission to set that up. Willie's hands are very prominent in the frame. We had a wonderful DP from Las Vegas, Steve, who shot that stuff. And we really wanted to make sure people saw that whatever era Willie would have played in, and he still would have been an elite athlete. And that was one of the missions of the film.
You know, what I love was in the last few years, you know, everybody thought they knew everything about Mays, but with John Shea's book and now this documentary, you know, so many things have come out and so many wonderful things. And really the job you guys did was incredible. And one other thing I'd like to say, you know, I assume most of this film took place in 2020 and 2021, but how you ended it with the Mets retiring his number, I thought, you know, was fabulous, that it tied everything up and brought us right up to date. So really kudos to both of you. I thought the film was wonderful.
Well, you know,
Thank you.
I would also say this about the film. It's not a Wikipedia page of Willie. You know, there's definitely some things in there that we didn't get in. What we tried to do was find a way to tell a cohesive narrative that really tied into the idea of mentorship and fathers and sons. You know, at the very beginning of the film, Willie talks about his father, you know, teaching him how to play baseball at a very young age. And at the end of the film, I asked Willie, you know, are you the greatest baseball player of all time? And he's not going to say that he is, but what he does mention in that answer is his father was a good ball player. So even you know, at 90 some odd years old, when he thinks of great ball players, he doesn't mention himself. He doesn't mention Mickey Mantle or Roberto Clemente or all the great players. It still goes back to his dad, you know, and I thought that was very telling. And throughout the film, you know, his father gets him out there playing ball as a young boy. Then Piper Davis from the Negro Leagues team, the Birmingham Barons, becomes a mentor. Leo DeRocher, you know, takes him under his wing in New York. And then by the time Willie is now a full-on adult and a star, he's the guy who mentors, you know, Marshall and all those young players, Latin players coming into the Giants. He's the one who mentors Bobby Bonds and even Barry Bonds. The first day we sat with Willie, I was taking notes, and he kept saying, "Take care of, take care of." That.
I think Nelson froze.
Uh-oh. Let's give it a beat, and then I've got a little something to add here if he doesn't come back in quickly. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. You know, Nelson hit on something. You know,
that phrase came up like 6 or 7 times, and it was always in reference to either someone looking at Eric.
Oh, you froze for a minute there, Nelson. We had a little drop out.
I'm done.
Sorry. Well, it's interesting. One of the things Nelson touched on that I found so captivating about Willie too, and the process we went through, is this idea that we were asking him if he was the greatest player, and him having this level of modesty about that conversation. You know, because that's the biggest debate that I think, you know, currently surrounds Willie, is where does he land on the list of the greatest players of all time? And I think part of the reason he wasn't interested in ever making a documentary, and he said no to so many people, is that modesty. I think that he is the kind of person who lived through his own excellence, understood his own need to strive for excellence, but didn't ever want to shove it in your face, rub it in your face, be the type of person who wanted to hang it on his own wall. And it was really interesting to kind of see him sidestep us in the process, but then also sidestep that conversation and divert it elsewhere. It's part of who he is and part of the fabric of, I think, how he was raised. That to me always struck me in this entire process of making this movie.
You know, it also, one of your other producers, Colin Hanks, was in a show called Life in Pieces.
Yeah.
I know that's not in reference to really anything to do with this, but when I was watching it, that's what I was thinking, that Willie Mays, how you guys showed it, was his life in pieces, coming up with the Giants, going to the Army, going to San Francisco, becoming the greatest player there was, and then coming back home. So that was something I related to that. If we're ready for questions before we get started, we have giant royalty in here. We have Linda Thomas, Ozzie Virgil's daughter, and Jeffrey Rhodes, Dusty Rhodes' son. So if they want to make any comments first, Linda, you happy anniversary, by the way. You're up first.
Thank you.
Make a comment.
This is great. It's amazing. It's finally nice to put faces with people that I've talked to on the phone so many times. The show was quite incredible. I was in San Francisco when obviously Dad was there. Many nights in Candlestick Park. Great memories. Love the fog rolling in and the weather there. It was just funny as I was watching it. I kept telling my husband, I remember everybody there, people that they had in the video, and Dave Kingman and Tito and his family were I was very close with them. So it was kind of nice to be able to see them again. Just kind of going back to my childhood. I was helpful in getting my dad involved.
Absolutely.
I appreciate, like Gary said, he's on film forever now, and that's really special to me.
Come here.
Yeah, it's just incredible.
Come here. Yummies, come here.
Watching everything that was just said about Juan. I mean, I used to babysit Barry Bonds.
Oh wow!
I used to babysit and hang out with Juan's kids. They're a little bit younger than me, but I remember all of them. I remember Patty, Bobby. They were all literally a part of my growing up. So it was really special, really special.
Yeah, it's so glad to hear that. We went down to Florida. We met Juan there at his house. We shot that interview with Juan, and then we flew out and shot with your dad right after that. And that's goosebump inducing stuff for us as filmmakers. To meet both of them, to be able to be in their space just for a minute, and to hear their stories. Like, I tell people the greatest treasure in my life, in my career, and everything that I do is getting to meet the people that I get to meet and being just in their world for a moment. And those are two that are on the top mantle of just experiences in the process of the projects we've been able to do. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I like I said, I appreciate the fact that he's a little part of it, and hopefully he was helpful, and just the entire show was just, it's funny. I told Gary when we spoke that somewhere about half hour in, there's a picture of Willie with a bunch of kids standing around him. And I had to stop the video real quick because one of them was my older brother who also played baseball. So
Amazing.
I took a picture of it and I'm like, oh my God, Ozzy, is this you? Because it looks like you to me. We had this great conversation about it, and I sent it to him, and then obviously told him and my siblings, Dad's on, you guys need to watch it. With, Ozzy spent so much time in the dugouts, like I said, every summer he knew all of them, obviously a little bit more personal than I did, but yeah, it was really special. And you guys did a great job. Thank you so much. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
A lot of people, it will resonate with a lot of people.
That's great. Thank you so much, Linda. The funny
Thank
thing
you.
was, Sean asked me when I was on the phone, do you know any of the New York Giants who are still alive? You can get in contact. And somehow I don't even remember how I met Linda, and I called her and said, would your father be interested? And she was like, are you kidding? Yes.
One more.
Yeah,
That was
absolutely.
great.
Oh yeah,
Thank-
absolutely.
Thanks so much. Jeffrey Rhodes, you want to say something on behalf of you and your dad and your family?
Yeah, how you doing, guys?
Good.
I haven't really been able to come on. Thursday's a pretty busy night for me. I want you to show you Dusty before I tell you a quick story. There's Dusty. Actually, all my dogs' names were Dusty. But anyway, I'll just tell a quick story for Willie Mays. I called him a year and a half ago or whatever, a couple of years ago on his birthday. And it came up somewhere in the news. I happened to be watching the news and said, oh, it's Willie's birthday. So I said, let me see. So I looked through my phone, I found his number. And where I live in Queens, by Rockaway, the reception's horrible. So I call him up and he answers. And I say, hey, Willie, how you doing? So I tell him, yeah, it's Jeff Rhodes. He said, I'm doing good, Jeff. How are you? I said, good. I just wanted to call him and say happy. And now the phone goes bad. So now we're starting to, I'm trying to yell to make it like that's going to work. And he's yelling at me. And finally he says, God damn it. I can't hear a goddamn word you're saying. and that's how that one ended. But I got a couple good stories that I'll tell you in a couple, 2 or 3 weeks, I guess it is.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jeff. All right, we're going to go to Harvey, Jeff, John, and then Bill. Harvey, you're first.
Let me unmute. Nelson and Sean, I love the documentary. I am not kidding. I've watched it 3.5 times.
Wow.
The halftime is while I was making some notes,
Right.
and I'm hoping you'll welcome some of the critical comments I have to make.
Hey, Dusty.
But what I start by saying is I was enthralled and mesmerized by viewing Willie exercise his 6th tool. You know what I mean by the 6th tool? Leo
No,
said,
but I'm hoping you tell us.
well, you actually laid it out by not saying it. Leo was labeled Willie a 5-tool player.
Right.
But this group has, I think, we never have taken a formal vote, but we believe there was a 6th tool, which Willie still has. The amazing ability to see the whole field, to see the whole game. And I know his vision is a little challenged right now, but he can see, he saw the whole field. He was a brilliant tactician on the field. That one part of the video where Willie was discussing being the field manager, and he showed how he moved his glove to move the players into position. I saw that in a game in the mid-60s, around 1967. I saw him, I was at Shea Stadium, and I saw him move Jim Ray Hart into position almost from where I was sitting in right field. Jim Ray was virtually on the left field line, and the Mets batter, a batter named Larry Stahl, hit a screaming line drive. Let's put it this way. If Jim Ray didn't catch it, it would have killed him. Willie put him in that position. And your documentary allowed me, and I'm sure all of us, to view that sixth tool, which he still has. He still has it at 91 plus years old. Now, I know that's one of the questions I would ask is, when did you actually film him? But it was extraordinary. And I thank you for that. One of the, there are a few points I want to make, if Gary will let me. One of the most important parts of your video, of your documentary, was the discussion of Willie in relation to Jackie Robinson. Just to put this in perspective, so I know I look a little crazy with my Giants hat and my Giants shirt, but I'm a lifelong Giants fan. I saw my first game July 10th, 1954. I was 8 years and 10 months old.
Hmm.
We were seated in right field at the Polo Grounds. I was fixated on Willie Mays. He made a great catch in right center field. He whirled around through the runner at home plate. I still see that throw in my mind's eye. I didn't know what a laser was, but that ball, I swear to you, made a white line from where Willie was to home plate. He stole home. And the transcript of that, I looked it up somewhere on one of the websites. Willie stole home. I know he did because my father scored it as a steal of home, but the transcript says E1. No, Willie stole home. I was hooked. I grew up in the Bronx. I was the only Giants fan. My brother and I were the only Giants fans in the Bronx. You could imagine we were in the middle of all Yankees fans. There was one Dodgers fan. He was a good guy, but he was a Dodgers fan. And I as a kid, I was involved in that great debate, Willie, Mickey, or the Duke. And there was no question in my mind. It was Willie. When the Giants moved to California, I was heartbroken. I was 12. I was heartbroken. Those stories John Miller talked about that in your video, about some reactions of the fans when the Giants moved. When I saw that, every time I've watched it now, I'm on my fourth watch, I raised my hand. I said, that's me. But I remained a Giants fan because people ask me to this day, and I said, it's Willie Mays. I want to get to the Jackie Robinson situation. I remember vividly Jackie's criticism of Willie. Jackie was I don't have to speak too much about Jackie. He is a monumental figure in American history. And his criticism of Willie stung me as a Willie Mays fan. And one of the things that I'm not sure your documentary pushed it through enough is that in growing up in Fairfield, Alabama, it wasn't just a segregated community. It was, according to what we've read in the various books, John Shea and Hirsch, it was a felonious, toxic, murderous community where there were lynchings on the outskirts of town. And Willie's dad told him to keep his head down, not merely to stay out of trouble, but to stay alive. And that was the environment that this young, he might have been and he is the greatest baseball player I've ever seen, but he was a child and he grew up in that toxic environment. Jackie grew up attended UCLA. He was highly educated. He was a brilliant guy, schooled. I don't think Jackie ever understood that Willie's diffidence, Willie's silence was couched in terms of survival. And at some point, when I shut up, I want you to comment on that. One thing that you left out of your video, of your documentary, was the fact that in 2017, Major League Baseball named the MVP award, the MVP of the World Series award after Willie Mays. And that, to me, is an important thing. I mean, just last week, when they announced, was it Jeremy Pena won the award? And I'm sitting here kind of figuring out we were all tied for first place. because the season's over. So my Giants are now tied for first place. But the announcer said, and the winner of the Willie Mays Most Valuable Player Award. That was good. I actually applauded. And I wished you had put that in. I think that's a significant recognition of Willie by Major League Baseball. Not that he needs it, but we need it. I got one quirky question.
Harvey, why don't we have them answer that? We'll come back to you.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. I'll stop. Thanks, Gary.
Well, all I would say really to that is that's a very significant. I was very happy when I saw that when Astros won and Pena getting that award. It just simply is Willie's life and career is pretty big, and we couldn't get every detail in. So that's just
if you guys saw the 2 hour and 30-minute version of this movie that we started with, which by the way, I think everyone on this call would have watched 3.5 times as well. Unfortunately, we needed to broaden our audience and find a tighter vessel to indoctrinate the masses and the non-baseball fans. I mean, that's part of the hard part about what we do with these documentaries, and it's part of the real undertaking for directors like Nelson. How do you put together a film in the sports world about this topic that is going to bring in an audience that is bigger than baseball? I think a lot of times you end up with movies, and this is not a knock on it. The Jeter series was really well done. It's a baseball series, and it's a heavy baseball series, and there's not a lot of themes beyond baseball. If you're not all in on Derek Jeter in baseball, you're going to have a hard time making it through a series like that. And there's a lot of people that is their catnip, but for us, we've got to really be careful that we can find a way to bring in these bigger themes, these more important themes. And there's only so much runway. The idea of the World Series trophy being named after Willie, that's something that fits in a card at the end of the movie, or, is something I think that's anecdotal and kind of a harder thing to shoehorn into our story. So that's probably why we didn't include it. And you talked about something really interesting, and I'll talk a little bit about this and then head over to Nelson. We realized very quickly that Willie's approach to race and his American experience was one where he realized that at any moment in his life, he could have everything taken away from him growing up in Alabama, because that was the culture there. And that is a lot of, I think, what shaped who he was and how he handled everything. Piper Davis, he talks about Piper Davis in those first moments in AAA with the crowd yelling at him in a way that he'd never been yelled at or heard in his life. And he grabbed back to Piper Davis's instruction and really kind of was able to, his father and Piper bring that into that moment and survive that moment. And I think you've hit on something incredibly important, and that is that to Willie's experience, to Jackie Robinson's experience, in the same way that we would never expect, I don't expect, Nelson doesn't expect, our movie doesn't expect any group of people to behave a certain way or handle things in a certain way. The experience for everyone is not monolithic, and the response is not monolithic. That is what's so intriguing about all of these narratives that we love to watch and learn and read and see in these documentaries, is they're so diverse and so different. And Willie's, it really is an important narrative in that grand tapestry of American culture.
I would say, the Willie Jackie dynamic is it could almost be another film, because there are levels to Jackie. Jackie at the same time was critical of Malcolm X. He was critical even of Muhammad Ali when he decided not to join the war. So there's a lot of context to Jackie's position. On one hand, he attacks Willie. On the other hand, he himself was attacked by a lot of more active people at the time. So there's a spectrum within. So Willie and Jackie here, there's a whole nother spectrum that Harry Edwards kind of represented and defined. So we tried our best to give voice to the criticism, because I felt like that's part of the historical record, but also to let Willie and the people who feel like Willie argue the other side and give more context to it. So, that's what our attempt was. I mean, I didn't want to delve. I mean, the bottom line is, Alabama in the 1940s was a really terrible place to be a Black person, period.
Horrible.
But we didn't want to make it a film just about that, because when you get into the details of that, it kind of derails everything else. And again, we were coming from one thing about Willie that's really interesting, and says a lot about his point of view. And as Sean talked about his father's counsel as well as Piper Davis, is that Willie's not going to dwell on any of that. He's not going to tell you his story of being afraid from the Klan. He's not going to tell you, even when we got into the stories in San Francisco, he didn't want to dwell on that. He kind of has looked through the world. Okay, there's terrible things that happen. I'm not going to articulate that to the world. I'm going to articulate what I think can happen, and in a sense, a more positive vision, if you will, of mankind. And I think that's part of the reason he was so successful in appealing to so many people, in that whatever conflicts, whatever anger he had, he transitioned that and channeled that into both playing ball and to being a mentor. And when I say that, I think the Reggie Jackson story is really interesting. We have in there where Reggie talks about Willie finding him and seeking him out. And basically, if Joe Morgan had lived, we'd have told that story. If we, there's so many guys, Frank Robinson, there's so many people who Willie tangibly put his hand on and said, I'm going to look out for you. Listen to me. I'm going to counsel you. So I think that's, and that's the view of a lot of people. There's the people who are, Reverend Jesse Jackson said this a long time ago. There are tree shakers and there are jelly makers. And what he meant by that is some people shake the tree, the fruit comes down, but someone's got to turn that fruit into food, right? And Jackie was in the middle of the tree shaker mode, and Willie was a jelly maker. He took that opportunities, helped himself and helped others. So I guess that's the way I viewed how we dealt with it in the film.
Yeah, and there's just to add one more quick thing, because
Sure.
you sparked something in me, Nelson, that I thought was really interesting. There was Willie not only not dwelling on it, also relayed to us some really incredible stories of his childhood in Alabama, and relayed that he was playing with white kids in the outskirts of Fairfield on the field, and they would play together, and the games would get broken up because the police would come because they didn't want them intermingling, and then they would all disperse. And the police would leave and they'd all come back together. And Willie's vision of the world was, I mean, this is me paraphrasing. Willie's vision of the world is that children, if we all could behave like children, it would be a much better place. And that he, as a kid, I think longed for that. And that's why he saw so much promise in these kids, and why he wanted to interact with them so much, is because he felt like they were the purest example of what the world's best version could be. And I think that's why he always took that moment to sign an autograph, to smile with the kid, to buy him an ice cream cone, to hit a stick ball with. This was what made him happiest, because he saw how great the world was at that point and at that age.
Well, let me say two things. It is absolutely refreshing to get an answer to a question or an issue that is a complete and full answer, and that I love. And I'm glad I posed it, because it fills in. Now, I'm not patting myself on the back, but I am, that is wonderful. Gary, if I can, I just got two more whimsical things. One question on I hope you don't block me out completely on this, but when the video started, I'm riveted, and the announcer says Willie hits 2 home runs in 1 inning. And I go, wait, what? That never happened. So I replayed it again, and I've concluded, without doing any research, that that's the voiceover from the program,
Home Run
what
Derby.
the hell is it called? I'm going blank.
Home Run Derby.
Home Run Derby. Thanks. Am I crazy? Yeah, I know I'm crazy, but it's kept me from going insane. But
well,
You know
think
what
it
I'm
was
talking
4 home
about,
runs.
guys?
I thought it was 4 home runs in one game.
No,
Is that
you
the
didn't put
voiceover
that.
you're talking
Again,
about?
I don't even want to sound like I'm criticizing. You didn't put the 4 home runs in, but you had it at the very beginning of the documentary. The announcer says he hits 2 home runs in the 6th inning.
I'd have to look at it again. I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, I
Okay,
don't remember that
all
at all.
right.
I don't remember that at all either. Look, you've watched it 3.5 times in the last 4 days, so you probably have a better handle on it than we do.
Yeah,
at this point.
that's crazy. I don't have a life. And my last question, and then Gary, I'll shut
it's
up
not
for the
crazy.
rest of the
It's not
evening.
Yeah, it's the Harvey show.
No, Mars, come on, you usually hog the airtime. I love Leo DeRocher. I love Leo DeRocher. He's my second favorite Giants manager behind Bruce Bochy. And I love his discussion of Willie, but could you possibly have found another video of Leo in any uniform other than the Los Angeles Dodgers?
He was saying what we needed him to say in that moment, in that jersey. We needed the sound bite. And honestly, it shows you the diversity of Leo's career, which is really interesting.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna quote.
I like to look at that uniform and hate it. It makes me
Well,
happy.
I'm gonna quote from the great Dwayne Kuiper. It almost made me barf. But in any event,
Thank you,
I thank you very much. I love you.
Yes.
I love the video. I'm gonna finish it, so I'll make it an even 4. I shut up. Thanks, Gary.
Jeff, go ahead. Unmute, Jeff.
Who goes next?
Yeah,
Yep, here I am. I mean, I'm off mute. Well, I want to thank you. I have to watch the documentary. Of course, I have to find out someone who has HBO Max. So maybe I have to go over Gary Mintz's house to watch it. But
You're welcome to.
Willie Mays, one of my favorite players. I was 10 years old at Shea Stadium when he came back to the Mets. And I remember it vividly with my father and grandfather sitting in the loge section, hitting a home run in the 5th inning to win the game against the San Francisco Giants. So I'm sure I'm going to love this documentary. My question actually was probably answered. Harvey did a great job of questioning, but about about the civil rights. I recently read a book by Terrence Moore.
Mars, turn your volume off, buddy. There you go.
I recently read a book by Terrence Moore called The Real Hank Aaron. And Hank Aaron was also critical of Willie Mays and Ernie Banks and Frank Robinson and others for their role in the civil rights movement after Jackie Robinson passed away. You already spoke about this, but I just wanted to point that out. And I thought your answer was fantastic. And it's so really, it's the way he grew up. And I know he was a peacemaker in the Juan Marichal, Johnny Rosborough fight. If you want to speak to that.
I would just say this, I mean, I think this is a point that Willie Brown, the former mayor of San Francisco, makes very vividly, that everyone is not, Muhammad Ali, in that sense that everyone's not a racial spokesperson. Everyone's not someone who wants to be in the spotlight talking about race relations. A, because some of them feel uncomfortable. B, because they probably wouldn't say it very well. And C, because there are people who do it much better. I think one of the points of the film and things we try is that everyone can't have the same role. The point that was made that Sean makes, I mean, listen, Willie was like 1.5 years out of high school in Alabama when he joined the Giants in '51. I believe, and you guys can probably know better, Jackie was 28, had been in the Army, had went to UCLA. I would say this is my
Froze
Froze
again.
again.
Darn.
feeling from talking to Willie and interviewing about Jackie, and that qualified to say that. But I think something else I should point out for you guys see this film. Willie, only from our research and reading all the books and looking at news clips and so forth, there's only one time he actually kind of replied in a forceful way to Jackie. And that was in spring training 1968. And the concept of that Jackie had been critical of him starting as early as the early 60s. But the only reason, and this says a lot about Willie's attitude, the only reason he even said what he said that we quoted in the film is because Jim Ray Hart and another younger Giant player were also criticized in the same sort of attack. And he felt that those guys needed someone to stand up for them. So a lot of, for me, what I got from this was Willie's attitude of loyalty. I go back to in the film, we talk about that incident where Alvin Dark is manager and the Latin players feel like he's being unfair to them. He doesn't want them to speak Spanish in the locker room. Cepeda talks about, his music being prevented from being taken on the road. And basically, there was a mini mutiny that was happening, and that Willie was the peacemaker between the Alvin Dark side and the Latin players. Now, what's interesting about, it says a lot about Willie is, and Willie volunteered this in the film. He says Alvin Dark is not a racist. For him, Alvin Dark was the guy who took a black guy from Alabama and made him the first black captain of a Major League Baseball team, and empowered Willie to be the defensive captain, literally on the field of the San Francisco and New York Giants. So for him, he's never gonna call out a guy who he's loyal to. He's gonna work behind the scenes. He's not gonna go in public and blast Alvin Dark. And even, now this incident happened in the 60s. He's 90 years old. He's still not gonna blast Alvin Dark. He's gonna talk about how the team came together and how that worked out. Alvin eventually got fired, of course, as everyone knows. But that sense of loyalty and that sense of not speaking out against other people who, even if you're being attacked by everyone, that's a very strong character part of Willie. And that reflects his attitude toward Alvin Dark. It reflects his attitude later toward Barry when he gets attacked. Once you're in Willie's group, once you're in his circle, he's gonna protect you as best he can, even if you fuck up. And that's who he is. He's a loyal dude, and that speaks to everything about him. Why he didn't speak up as often as other people. He felt like other people were doing a better job. That's Willie Mays.
Thank you, Jeff. John,
Thank you.
you're up. John Sackerman.
Thank you, Gary. And thanks for putting this together. And also, thank you, Nelson and Sean, from the bottom of my heart. The only criticism I have of the film is it was too short. Even at 2 hours and 15 minutes, it would have been too short for my taste. And I'm sure a lot of other folks.
We wanted to do a mini series. Trust me.
Yes, we did.
We would have took it. We would have taken it. But no, just one other thing, what you're talking about just now, Nelson. In fact, Willie told Cepeda and the other guys, he's not coming back next year. That's how he kept the peace in that particular instant. He must either had inside info or he was going to tell Phil and his guys got to go. That's how he managed that. Right. And Kurt Flood was also critical of him those years. Now, the most, you talked about the athleticism, and I always have said that I thought that if Mickey Mantle came up in the 70s, he would have been a tailback for Oklahoma. And if he came up in the 70s, Willie might have been a tailback for Auburn. Yes. I don't know. They might have gone to a different sport, so I'm glad he was of his time. Now, the one thing that really struck me is he claimed to have met Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth died in August of 1948, but the Birmingham Black Barons used to come up to play. So I'm just wondering. I remember the bus caught fire in a Lincoln Tunnel once.
Right. We wondered about that too.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say, this is one of those moments where we do our job and we gut check these moments, and we have to go back and look at the statistics. There was we're going to call it a 6-month window where Willie was playing with the Birmingham Black Barons in barnstorming and could have come to New York where Babe was still alive and could have actually crossed paths with him. Now, it's Willie's word against, from his mouth to God's ears. We decided to print the legend on that one. I was wondering if anyone was going to bring this up on the call, because it's definitely one of those things that baseball people catch and go, let me look at that. And when you look at the stats, it's a very tight window where it could have happened, but because Willie said it, we went with it.
I'm not sure. He said he met a couple of times in Long Island. He was so specific. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Did the Black Barons go to Long Island? But, so anyway, to Sean's point, there is it could have happened. We're not sure it did, but who's going to contradict Willie? Who's alive to contradict Willie?
Absolutely. And then just the other thing, I saw that one or two of the clips you took from his interview at the Museum of Living History. That is an incredible interview with him, and I looked at that, and it's just great because he was the recall and his talk. I really appreciate you using that. Oh,
Yeah,
thank you again very much.
Thank you, John. Bill, you're up.
Thank you, Gary. And I want to thank Sean and Nelson for the documentary. I enjoyed it very much. What I wanted to bring up a couple of things, but I first wanted to ask the two of you, how did you find Willie Mays and Ozzie Vahid Sr. when you interviewed them? Because one is 91, the other one is 90. How did you see them physically?
I got to tell you, those guys they're, you know, I'm 65. I just turned 65, and when I meet these guys, I go, oh, life is not gonna. It still goes on. It's still vital. Both of them are very funny. Both of them are still very sharp. Their recall is pretty good. Ozzie's fantastic recall, actually. And I thought they were both fantastic. I mean, Ozzie, we only used a little bit of him, but quite honestly, his history, he gave a history of Caribbean baseball that was amazing. The development of Dominicans in baseball. And also, you guys will appreciate this. One of the things that happened at the end of the interview is that, you know, people start riffing. He went into a long discussion of whether or not the Giants had a spy in the dugout in center field. And I mean, Ozzie pretty much confirmed that, you know, I don't know, you know, I don't know.
There was sign stealing happening when the shot was hit, the shot was heard around the world. There was sign stealing in center field.
Yeah, Ozzie went in deep on that. So someday we
a couple other guys did as well after that, because we asked about it off camera. So that was fun to
Ozzie was particularly great because he gave a lot of details that were very special and unique to his experience. We also, I mean, one thing that did, again, like the long version of the film, Ozzie also talked a lot about being thrown at and about Latin and Black players being thrown at by pitchers. And Willie particularly getting thrown at quite a bit. And, you know, just the culture of baseball then was the next guy after the guy hits the home run is going down.
Particularly by Don Drysdale, right?
Well, Drysdale was a big threat.
Willie a lot.
Yes.
Anyway,
and again, to your point about Willie, I just say this. You ask Willie about Don Drysdale, he says, yeah, well, you know, he threw at me. He never hit me.
Right. That would be Willie.
And then B, I forgot, he said the number 17-4. He had a number. He knew exactly how many home runs he hit off Drysdale. So in his mind, he won no matter what Drysdale did.
Right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say too that Ozzie Vahid was the first Dominican-born player to play in the major leagues, and he broke in with the New York Giants.
Well, I mean, one of the great things about the Giant franchise, and to your point, is that they really were, if you look back at the key franchise and really recruiting players from the Caribbean. And
Definitely.
it kind of leads up to that Alvin Dark conflict, because I think Marshall, I think they had 7 Latin players by 62, and they were key players in their team. And so the Giants, in many ways, foreshadowed the future of Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and plus the Giants and the Dodgers, that they brought in a lot of Black and Latino players because they played in New York, and New York City's always had a large Hispanic population and Black population in Harlem.
Absolutely.
So that really helps. What I wanted to also say, what Harvey mentioned, is that also Jackie Robinson, a lot of African Americans were hurt when Jackie Robinson spoke against Paul Robeson in Congress in the 1940s. And Jackie was also criticized because he was a Republican until Robert Kennedy freed Martin Luther King in 1960 out of jail in Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about the Jackie Willie thing, that it's I think what it really points out is that when people talk about social activism and they think back to the era, they think everybody all was on the same page, we shall overcome. Right. But in fact, there were many disparate views on what Black equality meant, how to get it, and so forth. And so Willie's attitude toward it is not untypical of literally thousands of other Black folks who weren't marching in the streets. So I think that's the context in which you have to take Willie in, that he was probably in many ways more typical of working behind the scenes and not being out front than a great many people were. He was actually pretty typical, his attitude.
And that was his personality as well. Jackie was more of a rebel.
Yes,
And Jackie was not afraid to speak up.
absolutely.
All right,
Thank
well,
you,
thank you
Bill.
very
Mars,
much.
you're up.
Have a happy Veterans Day, everyone, tomorrow.
Mars, go ahead. Unmute, Mars.
Yeah, okay. Well, again, I want to thank Nelson and Sean for a terrific presentation. I like when you pointed out that Willie did things his way that was beneficial for the kids and people, devoted a lot of his time. I'm glad you brought that out. The other thing I wanted to mention is when you guys interviewed me, it's been said many times about the coin phrase 5-tool player. And as we know, nobody ever used that. I guess a sports writer invented it. And that's why I guess you guys knew I was involved with jazz when you asked me about what jazz musician I would compare him with for skills. Well, Charlie Parker turned the jazz world around with bebop 180 degrees. So Charlie Parker's skills in music and Willie Mays' skills in baseball puts them at the top of the field in their professions. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
it's a
Mars.
shame. We had a whole section with Mars and about with different people talking about Willie as a musician and Charlie Parker, Coltrane, Miles Davis, Duke Ellington. Those were the reference points for everyone.
Thank you, Mars. Norm, you're up.
Okay, well, first, just thank you both so much for the movie. Thank you for being here today. I was lucky. I've only seen the movie twice. Okay, so I'm behind Harvey on that.
Slacker.
I had the privilege, though, or pleasure, because of Mars. I came to the premiere at the Castro, got to go to the party upstairs, and so I was able to shake both of your hands, and so that was a thrill for me. But Nelson, you might not remember me from sight, but I had the pleasure of hugging you after the movie.
Oh yes, absolutely. I'm sure. How's it going?
It's going just fine. And the reason, I mean, I don't hug people all that often. Your movie just moved me so much that I was compelled to ask you for the hug. I mean,
Oh yes, I remember. Absolutely.
And watching the second time, I wish you had been here so I could hug you again.
Oh man.
It's just a great movie. I got a question in terms of, you both have mentioned, time, you can only put so much into a movie. And so I've got one thing that I wish had been in the movie that I was curious about. Maybe each of you have like two things that you wish, even though it didn't fit for the movie, that you wish you would have put in the movie. For me, the thing I was wondering about was Monty Irvin.
Right.
You talk about father, son, and all that kind of stuff. Willie Mays called Monty Irvin like his father or his dad.
Yeah.
In terms of he was out there in left field with them. He was a star of the Negro Leagues, and they would go to the park and just talk about life. And I would have loved to have seen that. I'm wondering why that part wasn't in the movie. And then if you could just talk about a couple of things you wish you could have put in the movie.
Well, for me, it just was a matter. Once we got to New York and the Giants, because Leo also used the 5-tool thing, and he became a bigger and easier transition figure to bring us up, to bring Willie into New York, to bring him to the next level. So it really came down to, you couldn't put all of Willie's, friends, mentors in the film. So we just had to make a kind of decision that Leo worked better because of his role later on in defining him as a 5-tool player. I would just say what Mars talked about, we had a little section about Willie as a jazz musician. I wish we had been able to figure out a way to get that in. It kind of stuck out and didn't really fit. And then, one of the bigger threads that sort of got taken out, and particularly as we got closer to the edit, and this is something that Sean and I have talked about, was Mickey Mantle. The comparison that they came up together the same year, that in fact, as we found out that Willie and Mickey talked a lot about money, and they used to talk to each other about when they had contract negotiations. What are you getting? What are you getting? And comparing that and helping each other kind of. And then obviously later on, when they were out of baseball, they both got banned for a while for working with casinos. So there was a whole thread with Mickey Mantle that was in the film that got basically kind of got trimmed for time.
Yeah, I was gonna say the exact same thing about the Mickey Mantle thread, because Mickey, he is such a legendary character in American culture that losing him was a tough pill to swallow. But the other thing was, we could have spent 30 minutes in the Negro Leagues with Willie. I mean, there was so much stuff from the Negro League experience that we weren't able to keep. So much color, so much flourish, so much background of who Willie was and the players he was indoctrinated with and by, including Monty Irvin. That led into kind of, you know, Willie's formative years in the big leagues. So I would say the Mickey Mantle and the Negro League stuff was some of the stuff that would have really made this a beautiful two-parter if we were able to do that.
I mean, I would also say, I mean, Bill Greason, who's in the film,
Yeah,
the Birmingham Barons, I believe he's probably 96 by now.
Yeah.
Fantastic guy. Funny. I like Bill Greason so much that I keep a Bill Greason baseball card on my desk. Because he made quite an impression. He's about 6'2", 6'3", 60. He's 96. He's still erect as a street light. Very funny, and you know, just a great cat. So getting him was really amazing. Someone who's actually a mentor to Willie, who's older than Willie on camera. It was just fantastic.
yeah. And the one other thing, just really quick, was the Latin players in the Latin years in San Francisco. You know, we did not have enough runway to tell the story of why this team had more wins than anyone, and really get into the fact that they had more wins than anyone for all of those years and 0 World Series to show for it. And there's a lot of really interesting, you know, road to toll there that we couldn't. It became too inside baseball, and we were only able to scratch the surface of Willie and the Latin teammates.
Yeah, like, you know, it's interesting because, back up to Sean's point, this is not for HBO, not for ESPN. So the demands for what you're trying to deliver are different. You know, it's not as strict, and that's why the theme, I talk about the theme of mentorship and father-son stuff. That really gave the film, I think, a thematic weight that I think the people are. I think that's why I've had my women watch the film, don't expect to like it, but because it's not just a baseball movie, it has these kind of Field of Dreams elements to it. They're connecting to it, and I think that's going to expand actually the audience for it.
Well, thank you both very much. And Sean, if I ever am fortunate to see you in person, be prepared. I'm not going to ask for a hug.
Gentlemen, we have about 5 or 6 more questions. We still good?
I got jump in a minute.
I've got about 7 more minutes myself. At 5:15, I had a call at 5 that I pushed back to 5:15, so I can go for about another 7 minutes, six minutes or so.
Okay, I'm gonna dive out.
Go.
Nelson, be good. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. See you soon, Sean.
Thomas, you're up.
Talk soon, Nelson. Thanks.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. First of all, it's a fabulous piece of art. I mean, as was just mentioned, it transcends baseball immediately once you start watching it, and it just was very impressive. And thanks for doing it. And I particularly liked the use of some of Willie's contemporaries that talked about him and were very reverent to him. And everyone thought they knew everything about Willie Mays, but we certainly learned a lot, about the person. But the thing I have a question about is the treatment of Barry Bonds. It was very moving, frankly. Giants fan, live in the Bay Area, so that's the sanctuary for Barry Bonds. But we know he's not loved beyond that area necessarily. But his human nature was really striking. I mean, he has this surly reputation, and it really came through that he's part of this continuum. So.
And Sean
appreciate
Stuart,
it and how to work with
Zoom meeting.
Yeah, was there a question in there? Sorry.
Yeah, how was it to
I
work with
think I missed the
Barry?
end.
Mainly just wanted to thank you for doing
Yeah,
work.
I would say, candidly, Barry is a very guarded person, and I understand why.
Right.
I think Barry came from a trajectory of Black players who felt the need to be protective and protected and guarded, and Willie and his father probably to a degree Mars, can you mute?
Mars,
Instilled that in him. And what we discovered with Barry is he's been burned a lot. He's been burned by people that have asked him to come on and participate in something, and what they're really looking for is that moment of asking him the question that sets him off and him storming out.
Right.
And I understand where he comes from and what he's been through. And like a lot of people in the press when this movie came out asked us, we're trying to goad us into, why didn't you cover the steroids and Barry's story? And the movie's not about that. It's not about his narrative and his experience and what he went through. The movie's about Willie and what Willie went through and how Barry fits into Willie's story. Right. So that's not our story to tell. That's not our cross to bear. And it's not something we were interested in tackling. And we just wanted Barry to approach Willie's story in a way that he felt comfortable, made sense for him, and was most impactful for him. And that's what you saw in the movie.
Excellent.
Thank you, Thomas. Paul, you're up. Unmute.
Yep. Hi. I want to thank you guys very much for a wonderful program. I mean, there were parts of it to just, when you see the guy you've worshiped your whole life and you see the moments he went through and the special nature and personality he brought to baseball and brought to our lives, it just can't help guys crying. I think we all probably felt that. My question for you really is maybe for us, given the fact that you had a lot of other things that you wanted to say, but you really couldn't, maybe a director's cut for the New York Giants Baseball Preservation Society could be really helpful.
Yeah, that would be a lot of work, but I would love a longer version of it for sure. It would just be a lot of work.
Thanks, Paul. We're going to go to Barbara and then wrap it up with Hindi. Barbara?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I love the documentary. Thank you, everybody. Besides the wonderful documentary about Willie, I felt that the documentary is a period piece about our contemporaries. We've all lived it. We see all our commentators. We see people that we hold in high esteem. We see every day. John Miller's interviews were wonderful. Bob Costa, John Shea, etc. So I have a very small question. It's not very baseball. Where is John Miller sitting during his interview?
In his living room of his home in Half Moon Bay, where he no longer lives because he's moved back into the city. But that was in his living room in on the coast there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Hindi, Go ahead.
Me?
Yes.
Where? Well, I love the documentary.
Yes.
When Willie pleaded to include, not to leave Barry Bonds out of the Hall of Fame, what was that about? When was that?
That was, and it's interesting because I think it was a little bit under the radar because of everything that's happened with Barry. That was actually a ceremony to retire Barry's number at the ballpark. And it happened, I think, someone here might know, 2018 or 2019. I don't remember the exact year and date off the top of my head, lock stock right now. But they retired Barry's number and Willie was there, and Willie was not supposed to speak. Willie was just supposed to be with the rest of the legends sitting there, and demanded a microphone. And was it Kruk or Kuip? That I don't know who it was off the top of my head either. Who announced? It was Kuiper. He goes, when Willie wants the microphone, Willie gets the microphone.
Mr. Mays, he said. Mr. Mays.
Mr. Mays, exactly. Mr. Mays wants the microphone. Mr. Mays gets the microphone. So yeah.
Sean, I just want to wrap it up with a couple of quick items. In your opinion, that piece that he was pleading for everybody to get Barry into the Hall of Fame, now with Barry on again, you think that has any weight to possibly get him in?
You know, I've always been of the opinion that Major League Baseball and the Players Association hold the lion's share of the credit for the steroid era, and I think players should be forgiven to a degree for their part for Hall of Fame consideration and other accolades. We've forgiven the Players Association, and we've forgiven Major League Baseball as a whole. So why at this point are we holding, in my opinion, individuals at a higher standard than the organizations that govern them? And I think at this point, it's time to let that stuff go.
Well
The
said.
last thing is if you didn't know, the group is together mostly because the people in New York still rooted for the Giants when they moved out because of Willie Mays. They didn't see my father instilled that in me. He didn't see color, and he was just great. Listen, we cannot thank you enough. Please give it up for Sean Stewart. Sean,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for making such an epic film.
Yep.
And best of luck. Be well.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye, Sean.
I will hang around here for a while.
Ooh, wow.